Welcome to the Ultimate Ukraine channel. The first days of the new year welcomed us at the front with the most shocking days of the war. While the Russian army continues its attacks from the Donbas direction, the Ukrainian armed forces carry out actions in both the Donbas, Zaporizhia, and Melitopol. With the start of the new year, Russia started its attacks by raising its missile launches. The Russian army has repeatedly attacked Ukrainian civilian infrastructures on the outer fronts of Mykolaiv, Kherson, Donetsk and Luhansk regions. It is known that the main purpose of these attacks is to demoralize the Ukrainian people. However, the Russian army, which has taken this strategy to the next level by hitting the civilian infrastructure for too long, needs to see that these attacks are useless and cannot undermine the Ukrainians' will to fight. Russian soldiers know very well that Ukrainians are made of iron and taste the iron fist of the Ukrainian armed forces in every region. Likewise, the beliefs and hearts of the Ukrainian people are stronger than iron, but Putin has not yet understood this. This war is as much a psychological one as a physical one. In this case, the enemy's will and faith must be broken first. The will and faith of the Ukrainians are always strong, but the same cannot be said for the Russian troops and people, who fled from the front or from Russia, and sometimes rebelled, distrusting the regime and the army. Recent reports show us that the Ukrainian armed forces have dealt another shocking blow to the Russian army. Clashes intensified in Kovalivka, Karmazinivka, Novovodiana regions, which are on the border of Luhansk Oblast and Kharkiv Oblast. The Russian army is starting to lose its dominance in the region as a result of the attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces. At the same time, it is seen that there is a serious progress of the Ukrainian armed forces from the region towards the inner front. About 150 to 200 kilometers behind the front, a Russian tank detachment was destroyed by the incredible ambush of Ukrainians' Kraken Special Battalion. Since the first day of the war, the Ukrainian armed forces have buried Ukrainian lands with Russian tanks, while the number of Russian tanks lost in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions has increased considerably in recent days. The latest video footage shared shows how the Ukrainian armed forces used weapons procured from the West to destroy Russian tanks. At the same time, another point that draws attention in the videos is that the shortage of modern armored vehicles in Moscow is increasing day by day. A video shows that the Ukrainian Special Unit Kraken destroyed or rendered useless a group of Russian tanks and a BTR-80 armored personnel carrier in Novoselivsk, Luhansk. The footage came as the British Ministry of Defense warned that Russia was reinforcing a significant part of the front line in the region. The British Ministry of Defense wrote that Russian forces strengthened their positions in the Ukrainian city of Kreminna, which is at risk of advance. Clashes have intensified in the city in recent weeks. At the end of December, similar video footage emerged, showing two Russian T-64BV tanks being destroyed by the Ukrainian 59th Motor Brigade. Video footage recorded from rotary wing drones shows the tanks exploding dramatically as they are hit by Ukrainian ammunition. This heavy loss suffered by Russia in Luhansk is not the first. Ukrainian soldiers attacked Russian positions in eastern Ukraine by firing at least 2 shells from a HIMARS multiple rocket launcher, targeting Pervomaiskoye, a village in Luhansk, citing local officials. No information was given about any casualties or damage. In other words, it is clearly seen that these attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces directly target the Russian army. The main difference between the Russian army and the Ukrainian armed forces is that the Russian army tries to lead the war through civilian targets, whereas the attacks by the Ukrainian armed forces directly hit the Russian targets. In particular, we see that the Ukrainian forces are fighting to retake the strategic gateway city in the east. Clashes raged around the eastern Ukrainian city of Kreminna on Tuesday, as Ukrainian forces approached retaking this small but strategically important city, as the Russians fought to defend some of the war's toughest gains. Kreminna is the gateway to 2 much larger cities nearby, Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, to key industrial centers in the Donbas region that fell into Russian hands after a grueling and costly summer campaign. Russian President Vladimir Putin described the conquest and annexation of Donbas as the heart of the war effort. Since enduring a series of humiliating retreats, the Russian army has fortified its lines near Kreminna with a series of defensive barriers as part of an effort to consolidate its up and down positions on a rough front stretching for hundreds of miles. Recapturing the city and other nearby towns would expand the Ukrainian influence in the region and give them control of the main roads to Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. The situation there is difficult and acute, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said in his speech recently about Crimea and other regions in eastern Ukraine. Serhiy Haidai, the regional governor of Ukraine's Luhansk province, said in a statement that part of the Russian command in Crimea had withdrawn to the town of Rubizhne, a few miles southeast, in response to military pressure, but confirmation was not possible. The Russians know that if they lose Crimea, the entire defensive line will fall. Vitaly Kyzylyov, a Russian-backed official in occupied Luhansk, told Russian state television that the situation around Crimea and another nearby small city, Svatova, is very tense. Ukraine's counterattack in the east comes as the country's battered economy shows new signs of the cost of the war, making it more dependent on Western aid than ever before. The central bank said the Ukrainian government was struggling to raise money in bond markets, unable to roll over the debt it had accumulated before Russia's invasion in late February, and has since paid investors about $2.2 billion more than it had collected in bond sales. Overall, Ukraine's economy is projected to shrink by around 40% this year, as Russia occupies about a fifth of its territory, battered its cities with cruise missiles, and battered critical sectors such as steelmaking and agriculture. All of this has made Ukraine's public finances, which was shaky at its best during 3 decades of independence, deeply dependent on aid from the United States, the European Union, European individual donors, and other donors. Even if the war is going as the Ukrainian armed forces want, this economic bottleneck in Kiev may put them in a much more difficult situation after the war. But at the moment, the most important issue for Kiev will be to win the war they are in, because this economic crisis does not only affect Ukraine. At the same time, the Russian economy is paralyzed. Russia's economy has also suffered from the 10-month war, although it has not collapsed under the pressure of the punishment of Western sanctions. This week, Russian and Ukrainian leaders have once again suggested they are open to peace talks, but their terms have been rejected by their counterparts. Ukraine's foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, said his government wanted a UN-mediated peace summit, but could not be invited until it faced Russian war crimes prosecution. Putin said he was willing to negotiate, but days ago, he reiterated his determination to continue fighting and insisted that the lands captured by his forces must remain part of Russia forever. Putin showed no signs that he expected an imminent end to the war or harsh relations with the West. He met with the president of Belarus, expressing his concerns that he would use this nation to attack Ukraine. He signed a long-awaited decree banning oil sales to countries with a cap on Russian oil. As a result, Ukraine's campaign to recapture Crimea began in the fall as its forces finished sweeping the country's northeastern Kharkiv region and turned south, focusing on Luhansk, which was almost entirely under Russian control. Since then, the sides have engaged in a series of battles and artillery duels over the highways and villages around Crimea and Svatova. Russian forces captured both sites shortly after their full-scale invasion began and cut pontoon bridges over a river and built defensive lines to support the front. But the powerful blows of the Ukrainian armed forces are breaking the face of the Russian army. It is thought that the Russian army will not be able to hold out long in this region. However, we know that Russia is planning a possible invasion of Kiev, and the passage of this region to the Ukrainian armed forces will completely ruin the possible Kiev raid. Thanks for watching.